Hi, welcome back to the shop. Thanks for stopping by. This week's video we're going to make a hollow form out of hornbeam. People call it ironwood around here. The proper name for it is hornbeam. And we'll do something a little different with this one, something I've never tried before. So I'm just going to rough in a hollow form or a vase shape, and then I'm going to try dyeing it in cactus juice resin with limonite dye in it. And I'm going to soak the first one color, and then I'm going to put it in the vacuum chamber and try and color it with a different color in the vacuum chamber. We'll get into mixing up the colors here in a bit. I'm just going to rough this in and rough hollow it out for now, and then I'm going to dye it and stabilize it and bring it back and try finish turning it and see what kind of penetration I get on the dye and see how it works in regular wood. I've seen lots of guys dyeing burl and it seems to turn out quite nicely. This is a pretty plain wood. It's quite white. Not a lot of stuff going on, so I thought it might be a good one to try. So we're going to give this a little spin out here and we'll see how it looks. Notice the little darker specks and streaks to this. That'll show up later on. I got the outside rough turned down. I'm just taking a measurement of the neck of the vase so I know how big of a Forstner bit I can use to drill it out. So I measured how deep I can cut, and I marked the shaft with masking tape so I don't overdo it. Let's start hollowing out here with the new Easy Wood Tools #1 Pro Hollower, and it is really aggressive. You can get a lot of material out in a hurry with that. Going to undercut the shoulder now with the Easy Wood Tools Pro Series #3 Hollower, and it's important to test with this one to make sure you've got lots of room side to side and that your tool rest is out where it's on the flat part of the chisel. As you can see, it is there now. And this one's not cutting as aggressively as the #1 hollower because this has a negative rate cutter on it right now. The last job I did with this was resin, which it cuts much better with a negative rake. But I didn't have a lot to cut, and it still cuts fine with a negative rake on there. And there's less chance for it to catch this way as well. So I'm going to skip the rest of the hollowing because it is difficult to see what's going on. And we'll get right to the next part. Okay, so I'm going to show this for anyone that's not familiar with cactus juice resin. This is a stabilizing resin only. It's not a casting resin. So it is called cactus juice. I don't know what it's made out of, but anyhow, I would think cactus juice, but I'm not sure. So when you get it, it comes in a gallon jug if that's the format that you buy, and it has an activator. And you have to dump the entire contents of this activator into the gallon when you start, before you start to use it. Alright, you dump the whole thing in. Okay, so shake it up. Okay, so what I've done is I divided that 1 gallon of cactus juice resin up into 2 containers. There's a ½ gallon each. They're even amounts in each one. And I watch Zach Higgins, and I'll put a link to Zach's channel in the description of this video. And I consider him probably the most knowledgeable person out there on dyeing and resins and things like that. And what he says you use is 1 ounce, which is one of the small illuminate dyes, per ½ gallon. So I'm going to put 1 ounce of blue in one and 1 ounce of red in the other. if you've watched any of my videos where I've cast resin, you'll see that it takes only a few drops of this to color the casting resin, so an 1.5 ounce gallon is a lot of resin, so it should be really, really rich. It is really rich. And I think that's what you need to get the right penetration so it's not a bleached out look. And this resin will keep for quite a long time, so I can dye multiple pieces. I'll just save this and cover it. That all went to the bottom, so I'm just rubbing the bottom with every pass here to make sure that I get it all up. Alright, so that's most of the blue. Set that aside. Now we'll do the red. Now the first step in this is that you soak it. So you let the capillary action of the liquid being pulled up into the grain of the wood to get your first initial color in. And so what I'm planning on doing with this is I'm going to dye the top red, then I'm going to put the entire, let it dry out, cure it, then I'm going to put the entire thing in the blue. And my hope is that I'll get a vase that goes blue and turns progressively to purple towards the top. So I don't expect to have any red when I'm done, and I don't know how it's going to turn out, but and this is just a first try at doing this, so we'll see how that all works out. So this is too deep because it's going to bring it way too far up, and I don't want the red to soak way down into here. I don't think I do anyhow. So again, not being sure, I'm going to put some of the red into this other container. Carefully as I can. Where you can see. Alright, I'm going to start with that. And I'm going to put the vase upside down into this. Hopefully it won't get airlocked and float. Nope, that's down there pretty good. Alright. Now I'm going to let that sit, and I'll check on it every couple hours and see how much of it's coming up in. This wood was cut a little over a year, about a year and a half ago. It is pretty dry. I'm not sure how dry it actually is. It seemed fairly dry when I was turning it, so we'll see how that goes. And I'll leave this for a couple hours and we'll come back and take a look at what it looks like, and maybe I'll end up leaving it overnight, I'm not sure. So when I get a couple hours in, we'll bring it back and we'll take a peek at it. Okay, so you can see that the dye is being sucked up into the wood and it's not coming out into a solid line. It's got a really neat kind of a hit and miss pattern as it comes up through. And this has only been in there probably 20 minutes now. And I was really hoping it would do that so that I don't get a solid line between the blue and what I hope is going to be purple when it's finished. So I'm going to leave this in a little longer so that has a chance to get some really good color in it. And then we're going to pull it out and dry it off. And I'll cure that resin in the oven for 3 hours at 200 degrees. And then I'll put it in the vacuum chamber with the blue dye, and we'll take a peek at that when we get it in there. Alright, so I've taken this out of the oven. It's soaked about an hour. I put it in liquid, the dye, up to about this point. So the top up to here was in the dye, and then this just came up. This just got absorbed into the wood, and my hope was that it would go from a faint purple to a darker purple. We'll see how that all works out. And so now I'm ready to just give this a little touch of sandpaper to open these pores back up so that the second dye can go in. This has been cured in the oven, as I said, just 3 hours at 200 degrees. So I'm just going to give this a touch of the sandpaper, and we'll put it in the blue dye. Now it did go a little off center during the drying. Either that or else it's not in the chuck exactly the way that it was previously, which I should have marked. Actually, I should have marked where it was in the chuck, but I think that it's because the drying made it go a little off center. That's actually worse than it was. Yeah, so that's going to be that way. So I'm just going to touch it with the sandpaper. Just a little denatured alcohol. Get the dust off of it. All right, so I'm going to gear up a container now. Put it in the vacuum chamber, and see if we can't get the blue to go all the way through. I think this has gone all the way through. It's just not quite as dark as what I would have expected. But again, it's a very light wood and it's a hard wood, so I don't know how well it would absorb. So we're going to find out what it looks like after we put a vacuum on it. Okay, so I've taken this out of the vacuum chamber and put it in the oven, cured the cactus juice, the blue dyed cactus juice. So it kind of did what I wanted to do. I wanted to go from a blue to a purple, and I'm not sure when I sanded if this is going to be purple or if it's going to be more red than purple or what. But so before, when I put it on, it was at a round, and you can see it's still at a round, but not, oddly enough, as badly as it was before. And what I think caused that is the wood probably wasn't dry, although it didn't crack, and it's been in the oven at 6 hours at 200 degrees, so it is very light now, even though it has cactus juice in it. So I think I probably had it go out of shape a little bit because it probably dried a little as it cured. So something I learned is that stabilizing it in the vacuum chamber and putting it in the oven with the cactus juice and the dye didn't change the finish that I had on it when I started, and I only rough turned it thinking that I was going to get a roughed up grain when it came out, but it's actually it hasn't changed. And so I'm going to do this again in another video later on, and I'm going to finish this before I dye it and see what happens. So because it's a little bit out, and I don't have enough thickness here to turn this again, or else I'll have, for starters, no lip on it at all. So I'm going to try and sand it, and because I want to see how deep the dye went. I want to see how the color blended. So I sanded this, starting with 220 grit, and I did 220 and then 320 in sandpaper. Anyone who follows the channel knows that I'm renovating, so it seems like every video I have a bandage in a different place. That really looks like it did color through pretty good. A few streaks in it, which are kind of odd, but that's okay. That adds too. All right, so I'm going to get this sanded up, and I'll bring it back when I'm putting some finish on. All right, so I sanded this up to 320. Quit clanging stuff around when I'm talking here. I'm just going to take the dust off it. A little denatured alcohol. Kind of a neat color. All right. I think that's pretty cool. Now, because this is an experiment, I am going to experiment. So I know what this will look like if I keep sanding it a few more grits and put some Hampshire sheen on it. What I don't know is what will happen if I use abrasive paste. So we're going to find out. It's going to be either a really good idea or a really bad one. That's kind of neat. So I'm going to give it a little shot of the microphone now. Alright, now we'll go with some Hampshire Sheen High Gloss and see how that looks. Put a couple coats on. Kind of has a cosmic look to it. I like it. Like I say, what I think I'll do differently the next time, and I will try this again. I will rough in my piece. I'll leave my walls thicker. I'll dry it a little bit first so that it hopefully doesn't move. And again, I'm not 100% sure that was because of the drying or because of the cactus juice, but it moved before it went in the vacuum chamber, so it wasn't the vacuum chamber. So I'll dry it first, and then I'll dye one side, dye the other side. But before I start dyeing it, I'll finish turning it on the lathe, and I'll sand it right up to 1000 grit or whatever I'm going to go to. I won't use the abrasive paste because I don't want any oil or anything in the wood, so I'll just leave the wood bare, and then I'll put the stabilizing dye, the stabilizing resin with the dye into it. Same way, soaked on one end, vacuum chamber completely submersed after the fact, and then based on what I've seen, I think I can just come back at that point and just hit it with the abrasive paste at that point, and I think it'll give me an even richer color than what I have now. But this is really neat how that went through, and I'll zoom you in a little closer. Hopefully you can see it. Some of the neat stuff that happened in there. The finish is still a little bit wet, so I'm making lines in it with my fingers, but some of these little streaks and things that are in are really, really interesting, and I have no idea why there's little spots that didn't take any dye at all, but that's kind of adds to the look. So I'm really pleased with that for a test run. I'm kind of anxious to do another one. So I'm going to take this off, sand the bottom off, and I'll show you how I finish sand up in the bottom, and I'll bring you back once I get it cut off in the bottom. Okay, so I sanded this off of my vertical belt sander. Just to get it not quite flush, just the center left there, and a very little bit around the outside. Sat down to make sure I set it on a flat surface to make sure that it's sitting flat, not rocking. And now I'm just going to concave this a little bit and take some of these sanding lines out. Starting with 220. So while I'm sanding the bottom of this, just if you notice those little specks that didn't color, and remember at the beginning of the video after the vase was rough turned, I mentioned those discolored pieces. And looking at the start of the video and the finished vase, those discolored pieces are the parts that didn't take any dye. So that was kind of an interesting observation. I'll put some stills up at the end so that you can see how everything turned out. I want to thank everyone who subscribed to the channel. I certainly appreciate it. It's really grown over the last couple of weeks, and I really, really do appreciate it. If you like this video and haven't subscribed, please consider doing so. And if you could leave it a thumbs up if you liked the video, and a thumbs down if you didn't. But please let me know if you give it a thumbs down why, so that I can improve. Feel free to leave a comment. Any activity is good activity. And we'll see you next time.